Hi, I'm Dan, and I'm building one of my projects in public. What I'm building is a smart router for LLMs and HTTP requests. With this platform, you're able to send requests to different LLM providers or models based on rules that you create. For HTTP or web requests, it should be possible to alter the destination payload and other details of the request. In this recording, I create validation schemas in Zod and infer TypeScript types from those. After that is done, I then query the database and create overview pages for the deployments and providers in the platform. In an earlier change, which I did not record, I added an optional authentication system to the platform using Outtro. At this point, I'm finding out that it's not yet working correctly for our request, so I need to make some changes to make it work. Next up is adding a navigation menu to the left side of the interface. Maintain UI is the component library that I use, and the app shell component needs some tweaking. Besides, it also needs an icon. Earlier, I used ChatGPT to generate a pixel-style icon, an octopus, with the tentacles representing the platform, at the center branching out all the different request options and logic. I use an online service to convert the resulting PNG to an SVG, and then I need to fix the transparency. This is taking me longer than I anticipated. First, getting the right conversion with color correct, not black and white, and then I need to fix transparency. The types for the database entities I have created manually earlier, but I figured it would be nice to have them inferred from Zod types, so that I would be easy to do validation in the next step when creating forms for creating and updating information in the platform. So first, I create a separate types package. Then I write the schema definition, and I need to update the types in the database package to use that. And the biggest challenge here is to create union types that represent different types of objects. A provider, for example, can represent a LLM or a HTTP endpoint, and based on their type, they have different attributes. And it takes some time and trial and error to define that correctly. After the types have been defined, I need to perform some fixes in the code, mostly in the database migration / setup script, since that is where the database entity are used and initialized the most at the moment. At this point, I'm ready to create the overview page, but the authentication system gets in the way. So I need to do some debugging and troubleshooting to get everything to work again between front end and back end. finally it's time to create the two grids for displaying the configured deployments and providers. I use Cursor to generate the biggest chunk of the grid and then tweak it some more to my liking. Now, at the end of the recording, there is an overhauled type system. It took longer than I expected, but hopefully this makes it easier to do validation in future features for the project. There will be more recordings as I build out the project. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated and let me know in the comments what you think.